Oh, hello. Rock and roll lives.
Oh, welcome to Sunview.
Nice. Wow, this is like full
Nice
on.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. That's what you look like. This is what I look like.
Have a seat.
Oh, nice. Nice. Should we get ready around here?
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.
There's just so much. It's, to me, as Henri Cartier-Bresson said, it captures a moment in time. And a lot of my work and what I'm interested in is culture or anthropology. I can't even speak properly. Anthropology. And that's the background of it, that I often think that when I'm walking around the streets, I see images. And I think that's how a photographer looks. And quite often I see images just in black and white. I don't see them in color. So as a black and white photographer, I'm looking more for form or shape or light. That gives the essence of what I'm looking at, that it evokes different things rather than if it was a color photograph or when you're seeing in color.
Right. Joe Farrell, welcome to the podcast. Today is a treat because usually it's done over Zoom, and today we're actually sitting across from each other.
6 feet apart.
Sure. Yeah, that's it. So I found, you gave me the address. I haven't been to this part of town. Well, I have been to Chai Wan before, but I didn't walk 15 minutes to find this really obscure part. The building is, what's the name of the building? I love these names.
Sunview Industrial.
Sunview Industrial, yeah. So come up here and the most unbelievable space. I just love it. First of all, you come upstairs to an industrial building. You've got
industrial lifts.
Of course, industrial lifts. It's a large space, lots of concrete. But more importantly is that it's your studio. And so there's a lot of evidence of photography. Oh, a sound went away.
I just remembered that there was a sound we could eliminate.
Grazie mille. Okay. So as we dive in, typically we find out about the person and a little bit of their vision. And the idea is to inspire people who listen in about the possibilities of photography, just to hear about, because everybody kind of sees or responds or uses images in their own way. And you are somebody who's dedicated themselves as a photographer for a while. How about we talk about the first image which you sent me? And it's
I could also talk about Chai Wan, the area. Are you going? I assume you're going to.
We're just gonna go.
Edit this.
Yeah.
You're not
Edit
going to edit.
No, it's shooting it raw.
Oh my God! Oh, that's right, shooting it raw. I was just going to say, because I think it's an interesting fact that artists in Hong Kong, one of the big problems, especially now with COVID, is that the cost of space. And so I found my photography studio 8 years ago. And when I walked into this space, I immediately knew this was the one I wanted. And this area is full of artists, photographers, performance artists, musicians. And so probably the building you went before is that because the spaces are much cheaper, more reasonable to rent. Right. So if there's Hong Kong artists out there, it's something to look at. Is industrial spaces, not necessarily Chai Wan. There's Kwun Tong, and Wan Shak Han, although that's now more expensive because the MTR is directly there. Right. This is slightly still out of the way, but I was sold on it, partially because of the views, the mountain views, and this studio has lots of windows and lots of light. So it's perfect to set up my photography, and I would, recommend. Right.
The reason why we met was because the person I had on the podcast just previously is Elizabeth. And after hearing her story and getting to know her, my response was, you are a rare bird in Hong Kong. very rare. Somebody
Yes.
who's really dedicated herself to photography and the arts and images. And I see rare birds flock together because you are also this rare breed of person in Hong Kong. Like, so just to put the setting, okay, so we're seated at basically it's a work desk, a workbench. There's the recording material on the desk. You're seated in front of me. There's your computer tower on the left. There's it looks like sound equipment. I see the camera gear. It looks like a viewfinder camera gear.
That's a 4x5 camera.
Yeah, I love 4x5. Behind you are prints or photographs framed on canvas, stretched. You've got your image, your glasses. You've got your dog crate. You've got your sofa, and you've got another huge stack of photographs. And then you've got like a big whiteboard marker space that's essentially maybe like 6 feet by 10 feet or something. And you have your notes for marketing and Kickstarter stuff. And there's just, I'm surrounded by cameras, and this is a studio. I love it. It smells like a studio. It looks like a studio.
Yeah, and I recently got this display cabinet, which was from AO Bookshop, which was closing their space. And I've been looking for one for ages because inside it is all my bound feet shoes
I can see that
I've collected over the time. So I was very grateful that they were throwing it out because I've been looking for one to display. Part of it is also that because I do tours of Chai Wan art studios.
Oh, wow.
And I need to start them up again. That it's like a 3-hour tour going to 2 or 3 studios in small groups, and they can meet the artists, see their spaces, and it's really good to be able to show them the shoes that I have. Before I would have them on shelves and stuff,
well,
but it's
perfect segue, I must say, for the first image. Let me describe the image. You work in black and white. In this case, it's a black and white photograph.
It's all film. It's all analog.
Okay, so it's all film. Film into cameras. So the image is black and white, and it's got that delicious richness of film black and white. The subject matter is gnarly. Okay, so you use a Hasselblad for this one?
Yes.
Of course. The subject matter is gnarly, and so the image is of, well, it's hard to... Some people find feet hard to look at. You know, like, especially the older people get, the more their feet kind of get a little bit weathered and stuff. Because, you know, it's like hands. You can't... They show the wear and tear. So why don't you explain this image? Because it's full on.
Okay, so this image is of one of the women in my project. So to begin with, my project I've been doing for the last 16 years is photographing women with bound feet in China. There's none left in Hong Kong, but I go to Pacific areas in China and have interviewed them and photographed their feet and their homes and their daily life so that you get a glimpse into their world. This is of Sushi Rong, who was my translator's grandmother. So originally I had an exhibition in London 14 years ago, and I showed work from China, from Cuba, from Tibet, and one of my longtime friends, Zelda Cheetle, who's a art connoisseur professor, whatever, she's got multiple titles. She used to run the print room at the Photographers Gallery in London. And she's a great friend, and I said to her, what could I have done better? Give me some constructive criticism. And I really, truly believe that constructive criticism is extremely important for everybody to be able to move forward. And Zelda said to me, you should focus more. And I think it was a real wake-up call, and I thought, right, what I'm going to do is look at women's traditions, specifically bound feet, as I was living in Hong Kong. And so I went, and because I lived in Hong Kong, I asked various people in China, in Hong Kong about bound feet, and everyone said no. There's no women left that have survived this, that they're too old. It was a tradition that started or was more prevalent in the Qing dynasty. And eventually somebody came to me and said, my grandmother has bound feet. So I went to China, did my first photography of bound feet. And the next year I went back and I couldn't find my translator. This is pre-smartphone. This is pre-social media, especially in China. So I lost my translator. So I was trying to find a new one. And the new one, when I explained the project to her, she said, my grandma has bound feet. And that is how I met Sushirong, who's the woman whose foot is in the photograph. On that day that I went to photograph, I went with her granddaughter, my translator, Blake, who was an English teacher at a local university, which is how I found her. And the most amazing thing about it was that at one point I've got photographs of Blake sitting on the bed, the kind of Chinese bed, both of them with bare feet. And I took these photos because they were amazing. And Blake said to me, and the family, the father and the sisters all said, you cannot use those photos. And I said, that's fine. You know, I don't have a model release from Blake. So I said, but why? Why do you not want me to use it? It's so natural. It's so beautiful that this woman who has bound feet, and this is her granddaughter without bound feet. And they said, because she will be ridiculed on social media. And I was like, by whom? And they said, by people. And I said, well, you know that there's nothing wrong with it. It's a girl sitting with her grandmother. And they were like, said, no, it's a huge problem. So I remember taking those photographs, so this specific photograph, and having this whole discussion about the next generation or the 2 generations later, thinking that having the photograph, the foot of the 22-year-old was more of a problem than photographing the bound feet foot. Okay. Which I thought was an interesting kind of juxtaposition, that it wasn't the bound feet that was the problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think when you tell me this, what I think about is saying, well, maybe there's the shame, for example, of the granddaughter having to go, and not that her feet are not bound, but then the shame of being caught in that situation, of having, you know, the grandmother's feet kind of publicized. It's funny to be having this conversation, yes. Grandmother's feet publicized, but to have that kind of in the spotlight, more or less anonymously, and having this you know, young girl who's 20 or whatever being connected to that, and maybe, I don't know, having a kind of a social pressure this way or that way.
No, I completely understand that. It was, I mean, I found it very interesting, the whole situation with all of the women. I photographed 50, 60 women.
In total? Wow.
And interviewed them all. And so I produced a book 4 years ago on 50 of the women that I had documented.
Is the book still in print?
Yes.
Give us a title.
The book is called Living History, Bound Feet Women of China. And it is a book that I put together myself. I actually did a Kickstarter for it and got, you know, twice the amount of money that I needed. But with Kickstarter, there are issues. You don't think about all the administration time for one thing and posting. So with these 50 women, one of the interesting things was that the people that actually didn't want to be photographed, it was more their children, their adult children, who were saying that, no, I don't agree with it. And I'm like, well, it's up to the woman herself. Because the majority of them were in their late 70s, going up to the oldest one was 102. And obviously in 2020, I was unable to go into China and see them and photograph, but I phoned them. Mm-hmm. I phoned everybody about 2 months ago and previously 6 months ago to check on them to see how they were doing. And I was actually told that Sushi Rong had passed away.
Okay.
So she has no longer. And not only that, so I would repeat it. The first time I met her, and that photograph was in 2008. Mm-hmm. So I repeatedly went back and saw her. She was an incredible woman. She would always make these dumplings for me, which were fantastic. I mean, big trays of dumplings. Mm-hmm. The last time I saw her was in 2019, and it was a very poignant moment because when I first met her in 2008, the Chinese government were going to demolish her village.
Oh, wow.
Because they built a railway station at the end of her road. Mm. It took them 11 years for her to actually have to move out, mm-hmm. which was fortunate. And when I went there in 2019, it was 2 days before they had to move out. Oh, wow. And so it was, very typical in rural areas that they were moving them out to a high-rise. Mm-hmm. And that once they built high-rises in that area, they would be able to move back into them.
Right.
But obviously Sushi Rong is unable to do that because she passed away. So on the day I saw her, I was with her son and her 2 daughters, and my translator and my driver. And we all sat there making dumplings mm-hmm. in silence. Sure. And I've got video of it because I did ask a couple of questions like, have you always lived in this house? And she said, yes, since she was married, of course, because mm-hmm. when traditionally in Chinese households that when you marry, you move to the man's village.
Yeah.
And so she had lived there for 70 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And all her children were born there, not in a hospital. So I was saying, to the children, so you were born here? And they were like, yeah. So it was just suddenly, it all was dawning on me and them and everything that this is it. Mm-hmm. This is the last time. And they're saying this is the last time we make dumplings. And it was just quite incredible. Mm-hmm. So she was a huge part of my project. And, I've got x-rays of her feet.
Right.
And I have some of her shoes, the wooden kind of husk ones sure. are her shoes.
Let me just again, so for the listener, what you see is the foot.
Sorry, I didn't describe the photo. I did go off into a story.
No, that's part of the format. Okay, so it's perfect. So the image is basically 1 foot facing the camera, and so the heel is it shows, it's basically this is an elder foot, I guess, and essentially to picture it, it's imagine if you took your hand and you made a fist, and then you smushed your fingers into this weird kind of so your hand looks like this weird kind of cone, odd thing where the big toe is sticking up on the top, and then the other toes or the other little piggies are kind of smushed together underneath. And when you look at it, you realize, oh, wait a second. Physiologically, the bones in there have all been really realigned and over time. So maybe explain, because you know this, give a quick explanation of how do human beings get their feet to look like this?
So there's many stories about this, and popular fiction will say that there was an auspicious day and they used goat's blood and all kinds of things. You have to remember the majority of the women that I documented or are still documenting are not from rich backgrounds. They are not the elite. They are farm workers. So to them, it was just a necessity that it had to be done. So the big toe does remain pointed outwards, and then they had cotton long pieces of cotton that were wrapped around their toes and then towards the back of their heel and then forward again to wrap around the toes, actually bringing the toes and the heel closer together. So the metatarsals were actually pushed upwards, and it created a crevice between the heel and the bottom of the foot. So a lot of the distance, how the foot became so small, was because everything went upwards, was pushed upwards. So Chai Wan was actually known as one of the most beautiful women in her village because she had such perfectly formed bound feet. So she was top of the list for getting married. So even though it wasn't with, the rich, when the farm workers and laborers, that if they had bound feet, it was more likely they would marry somebody who also had more land, more sheep, rather than the dustman man kind of
Got it.
thing. So it was still a hierarchy, depending on your feet. So yeah, this foot was taken on her bed, and it's with the Hasselblad, and it's I've got multiple photos in there of that shoot. You can see that, the toes seem broken, the 4 toes underneath and the big toe above. She had incredible feet. It was just amazing. I think you laugh. I know part of it. So
it's just, look, this is something that you've been thinking of, has been sort of saturating your subconscious, your conscious, your sight. For somebody who's not in it as much as you, who has as many connections and whatever, my reaction, which is...
I know your reaction, you said immediately gnarly. And it was very interesting because I was like, oh. And that was part of the process of how I work and why I do it. The first woman that I photographed, I said originally, was my driver's grandmother, the photographer of her over there.
Got it.
Zhang Yongying. And she had the most beautiful bound feet, the actual form of it. Within 1 hour of meeting her, she had taken off her shoes and socks and was showing me so that I could photograph, which is not my normal way. I like to get to know the people in my projects and before they start undressing. And so it was quite amazing. Because I went in there with preconceptions of what bound feet are, and especially as a woman thinking, this is so wrong, this is so bad, that how could they do that to a woman, a child, and came away from it. And now, 16 years later, completely on the other side and realizing it was actually more part of their culture, that how do we better ourselves? How do we get on? Which is very feminist.
Sure. Okay.
That it's kind of like, if I make myself more beautiful, then I'll have more.
Right.
And we do that in every society.
Sure.
And so it made me realize that, and to research and look at how women adorn themselves or modify themselves to be considered attractive, aesthetically pleasing.
Sure.
And so in Chinese culture, that was the thing.
Right.
So the first day when I met Zhang Yongying, I held her foot in my hand, and I've told this many times, it changed everything.
Sure.
Because I looked at it and it was like a sculpture.
Okay.
It was like, wow, what she actually did to achieve this, to attain this beauty that everybody wanted. And she did it. And everyone else turns around and said, that's disgusting, that's horrible. And so like, well...
The one question that pops into mind is, how mobile are these women?
Oh, extremely.
So they can walk? Or
oh, God, yes.
Okay.
Yes, they're actually pretty sprightly.
The feet or the people?
The people. They would... When I met Zhang Yongying originally, 2004, I found out that in her village, there was 3 other women with bound feet.
Wow.
I mean, I remember them sitting around chatting, and then I'm like, hang on a minute. they've got bound feet as well. But they said, no, we don't want to be part of the project.
Right.
So I said, fine. It's just, there isn't just one.
Sure.
There is more. And I produced another book, which is around here as well somewhere, which is just called Joe Farrell Photography 1. And in there, it has the photographs of the women sitting around chatting. And so I sent them each a copy. And then when I went back to see them the next year, they said, can we be in the next book?
Oh, that's nice.
So they then allowed me to photograph. And the other thing was that when I showed new women the photographs I'd taken so they could understand where I was coming from, that I wasn't trying to say this was a bad thing or laugh at them or anything, that they were fascinated by looking at how other people's feet were.
For sure.
Because they hadn't seen it.
Right.
Because part of it is Chinese culture and how they don't discuss it. It's considered such an old tradition that it doesn't reflect modern China, and they don't want it to appear out there.
Got it. I really appreciate and recognize and hear in how you speak your very strong feminist-driven perspective, and you touched on it in terms of which created a great segue to the next image, which was what and how do women do in order to, they get certain cards, they're dealt with a certain hand, and it's like, okay, well, what's the best you can make with what you've got? Why don't we talk about the next image? Because I don't know if that fits in that, direction. Yes. But
completely.
So the next image is called Chin Women. Do you want to describe it?
Yes, please do.
Now, you here's the thing. I feel a little bit awkward because you began so strongly talking about black and white photography, and then
I sent you a color image. True. This is an iPhone photo.
That's beautiful.
That's why.
Well, not to plug that company.
Oh, sorry.
It's a beautiful image.
Yes.
Okay.
I haven't released the black and white ones yet, so partially it's so that's why I sent you a color picture from my smartphone.
Got it. Well, look, so in the image, you have two young women sitting, smoking what could be whatever they're smoking. It could be pot, could be just tobacco, it could be...
It's a long pipe.
It's a very long pipe.
But each of them have a pipe.
Yes, each one has a pipe. The bowl is very tall and conical and whatever. Speaking of feet, okay, so I'm looking at this young woman's feet, pretty dirty and calloused and you know.
I would say they were gnarly.
Yeah, okay, these feet are gnarly. So it's in a village, I would assume somewhere in Asia, potentially, let's just say northern Thailand. They're sitting at the step of a wooden sort of building with like this tin kind of roofing in the background. They're both smoking this stuff. They're wearing, both of them have these like long sarong looking skirts. There's a beautiful play of purple and violet and blue. So in that sense, visually, and then their skin really works well with the wood tone. So the color of the wood, and then their skin is relatively dark, I'd say warm olive. And on there, I guess part of what makes the image even makes you stop is that they both have pronounced facial tattoos, and one is looking straight at the camera and the one is looking off camera, and it's powerful image. So please explain why this image.
This image, I think even with the color, this brings back a lot of memories and a lot of ideas about why or how women alter themselves. So this is the Chin tribe, which is in Burma, Myanmar. And this woman, the one on the left, that's her home. Mm-hmm. I had actually slept there the night before. So just right behind, I was sleeping on that floor with my mother. I took my 80-year-old mother with me, which was wonderful. And it was about looking at the Chin tribe. Now, there is 15 different groups in the Chin tribe, which are spread quite far out in rural areas of Burma. And I had found a guide who was doing ecotourism, where he would take you to the houses and he was teaching them about being more sanitary, cooking well and stuff. And then they were paid through him and money went to the local schools. And so it felt like a much better way of actually doing it. Although we did go there on motorbikes, which for my 80-year-old mother was great fun. Back to the Chin women. They're absolutely incredible. So what I was saying was that there's different groups. So the different groups have different style tattoos.
Oh, okay.
So I have, over the last 4 years, been traveling around Burma to document the different style of tattoo in the Chin tribe. And they go from, this one is quite, in some ways, if you think about it, more Aboriginal looking, that it's got lines and circles and dots. Whereas some of them are all dots, some of them all stripes, some of them are all swirls. And it's, asking them, finding out more about their lives and why they did it. And again, it was done at a young age. Typically, they had it done when they were about 7 years old. And they would do it in one day.
Oh, wow.
Burmese government banned it.
Okay.
And so these women in Myanmar are the last remaining women in the Chin tribe that have tattooed faces, because they would be fined if they had it done after that. Wow. And so I was trying to make a collection and ask them. So a bit like the bound feet, is that it's the last remaining women with this actual tradition. And they, just like the bound feet women, about a third of the women that I talked to, they bound their own feet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because they wanted to make sure that they were part of their society, that they had a better chance. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with the tattooed faces was quite often these women told me that they would run off, not telling their parents, to the tattoo artist to have it done.
I just want to point out that looking closer at the images, the woman who's closer to the photographer is, in a way, she kind of dominates the image. When I look closer, she looks a little bit older. Like her eyes look a little bit older. She looks like maybe the mother of the other one, who looks quite younger. And if the elder is in her, let's say, early 40s, the younger looks like maybe 18 or 16.
No, she's much older. I think she's about 25.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say 57. Okay.
Yes. Not quite.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Okay. How long did you stay at their place?
2 days I stayed with them, and then I moved on, and I saw the guide that I had found. He took me to stay with several people, meet them, find out about their life. And I was supposed to go back to that particular area to see them, because this was pretty out of the way, which is why we went on a motorbike last March.
Oh, okay.
And I was on my way to the airport.
Oh, wow.
When I found out that the flight had been cancelled.
Right.
So I had a 5-week trip planned.
Okay, yeah, that just fell apart.
Just completely and utterly fell apart. Still feel distraught from it today. One of my suitcases is still unpacked.
Just in case, you never know.
It's still full.
Yeah.
I haven't unpacked it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of like I was devastated at the time. Mm. So I do go back and visit them and find out more about them. And some of them, I've gone back 3-4 times already to see some of the other women, like these two. This is a mother and daughter. Okay,
so right now Joe is pointing to is that printed on canvas?
Yes, this is a canvas print.
Okay, so it's printing. It's a photo behind her, just kind of, I guess, sort of held up with magnets. And so, wow, the facial tattoos are a lot darker.
Yeah.
Is that a boy at the bottom?
No, that's the mother.
That's the what? Okay, that's how off I am. That's the mother.
That's the mother.
Yowza. Okay, so the mother looks like a kind of a petulant skater boy.
Yes, I think it's the
cap.
beanie.
Yeah, the beanie. Yeah.
Yes.
Nice.
So I had spent like a couple of hours with the daughter.
Right.
And photographed. And then the next day I came back and this woman, then I found out that was the mother. And they even have the tattoos over the eyelids.
Yeah. Wow, that's intense.
It's very... Yeah, but so it's all about tradition. It's all about culture. It's about belonging. It's about how if you don't do that, then you are not showing you belong to a group of people.
You're not the in tribe. You're not part of the in group. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's which is what we do in fashion and cosmetic surgery in the Western world. So it's not actually very dissimilar, in my personal opinion. And so they were doing it so that, they belonged. I mean, these are people who are not very well off.
Mm-hmm. But these are the kind of the cultural cues, and it's kind of how things are done, So, like in my young family, we got our daughter's ears pierced when she was a baby, and it was just one of those things. How about we move on?
So why did you start interviewing?
Well, of course, no, it's great. Yeah. It's great. No, I think what it is we were thinking, well, the older she is, the more it's going to hurt. So, we just gave her the ear piercings, thinking that it was going to be less painful down the road. But
why should she have her ears pierced? Was it culturally, or was it tradition?
No, but obviously those are good questions, right? In the sense that in our culture, girls have their ears pierced, and that's I'm Western Canadian in our culture, the Canadian. So we were thinking of getting her some facial tattoos, but then my wife said I shouldn't. I never get to play. I want to give her a mohawk. I am not allowed. I wanted to give her facial tattoos. I'm not allowed. No fun.
Terrible. No
fun.
When I don't even remember how old I was. I think I was about 12. Me and my sister, my big sister, went to a place to have our ears pierced. Mm-hmm. And we got there and it was £5. And we only had £5. So we both got one ear pierced. And I've never had the other one done.
Oh, really? Oh, so you only have one ear?
I've only got one ear pierced.
Wicked.
Yeah, and my sister since has had the other one done. But I was just like, no.
Oh, good for you. That's fun. That's good. That's a nice little... That's nice. That's sweet.
Anecdote, yes. It's really weird. I used to wear really large earrings, a cherub. Mm-hmm. For some awful reason. And people would always say, oh, you've lost one earring.
Yeah.
No, it's safely at home in the case I lose it. Anyway, awesome. So the tattoos resonated with me because I realized that they see great beauty in it. There's also this traditional thing that they had the facial tattoos done so that they said the Burmese could not steal their daughters.
Oh, okay.
Because the daughters were so beautiful, and there had been a king that had taken Chin girls as brides.
Oh, okay.
And so it was a way of, in some ways, making them themselves look ugly.
Right.
But beautiful.
Yeah, to keep them in. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this is not what I was expecting from our conversation, which makes it so much, so much cooler in a way.
What were you expecting?
Tea sets and hamsters. I don't know. No, I have no idea. I wasn't expecting anything.
No, I think they threw me out of England because I didn't like tea.
Oh, okay.
I like Chinese tea, but I don't like tea with milk.
Right. Got it.
I'm a coffee person.
Let's move on to the next image because your images are very powerful. How long have you been doing photography?
More seriously, well, I suppose 9 years ago I started again more seriously, which is when I then had the Kickstarter. And I mentioned the Kickstarter again because it was because of the Kickstarter that people started noticing my photographs. I had been doing this project for years, and I would send it to magazines and nobody was interested. And I was living in a flat in Chai Wan, and I had pictures of the bound feet blown up to like A3 size and stuck all over my living room wall.
Wow.
Just to remind myself, because it was like nobody's listening, nobody cares, nobody wants, but I think it's so important to capture these women with bound feet before they disappear. And when I did the Kickstarter, I produced press releases and I sent it out to people, and I got a phone call from the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
And they called me up and said, could they interview me? And that was it. Once the Wall Street Journal, within days, I had the Washington Post, Huffington Post. I had, it went on to CNN, Vogue Italia, the Daily Mail, the Guardian.
So you work in black and white. Do you print? Do you have a darkroom here? Or do you...
No, I don't print it. I do. You can see over there that white thing.
Okay.
It looks like a foldaway wardrobe or something. That's where I dry all my film.
Okay.
So I process all my film here. I've got all the tanks and everything out in the corridor. And so I process all my film here, and I dry them in there so that they're dust free. Mm-hmm. And so then those grey boxes over there are full of negatives.
Okay.
And then I have like my Nikon scanner behind you so that I can scan large format.
Oh, got it.
So that I can scan it for, promotion, mainly Intercenter magazines and stuff.
That's great.
So yeah, I just had a Australian publisher contact me because they want to put it in a book called The Short History of China, coming out in May 2021.
Nice.
I don't know. It seems like, how can you write a short history of China? Okay, so they'll be using this image, actually.
Nice.
This is the image that they'll be using in the book.
Okay.
Yeah. The one of the bound feet. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's talk about the third image. It's a kind of black and white that I describe as the word that pops to mind is delicious. It's delicious black and white. So made at ground level, it suggests you're lying on your belly and you're taking a picture of the people's feet. You have a foot fetish, it seems, and then maybe not. And then so it's and your subject is seated on
doorstep.
On a doorstep. Okay, on a doorstep. And her hands are beautifully kind of veined and weathered, and she's wearing, you can just tell, a ring, lots of bracelets, but what really captures the eye is her feet are in flip-flops, but her shins are kind of like surrounded or bound, or essentially there's these perfect gleaming. It's hard to know if that's brass or if it's silver. It's brass. Just one on top of the other, on top of the other. There's probably, I don't know, maybe say 25 or 30 per leg. And basically imagine a shin just covered and with these rings of what looks like very solid metal.
Yeah, up to the knees.
Up to the knee. Okay, so what country was this photographed?
This is also in Myanmar.
Oh,
this is how the journey began. How the journey began was when I was talking. I've done lectures. I've done 2 TEDx's on women with bound feet, and I show images of boob jobs, breast augmentation, whatever you want to call it, all kinds of ways that we modify ourselves to be considered attractive. And I was showing the pictures of the Kayan women in Myanmar, which have the brass coils around their neck. Mm. Now, a lot of people wrongly assume that they're from Thailand because in Chiang Mai there is what is known as a Kayan village, which is for tourists. Mm. And basically people go there to look at and photograph, like a zoo, the tribe people. You have to remember with Myanmar, it's very multicultural, that it's got something like 156 different indigenous groups.
Oh, wow.
And so that's partly why the name Myanmar came about, because they're not all Burmese. So it's no longer known as Burma because politically correct it would be that there's more groups of people. So they were forced out by the Burmese government, the Cayenne, and they escaped to Thailand and northern Thailand, to Chiang Mai, and set up there. So I had learned that. So I was showing photographs in my lectures, in my TEDx and stuff, of a Cayenne woman, which I didn't take. I got a photographer's permission to use it. And I was like, hang on, I should go there and have my own photos. So I went originally 5 years ago to Myanmar, to a remote area which is towards the Thai border, where the original tribes are from. And that had only been open in the country for 4 years. So I went around and photographed and documented a whole group of women, which is just fascinating. So this picture is of the feet, because part of it was as well was I'd always seen the brass coils around their necks, but I hadn't actually realized that they put brass coils around their legs and their arms at the same time. Wow. And again, there's a myth that it was to stop tigers attacking them, but it was more to do with to show where they were from, who they belonged to again. Sure. And so if you didn't do it, then you were not conforming to that society. Right. So it was important. So I thought, again, this is a tradition that is dying out, but I was wrong in a couple of ways. One girl, which I photographed, and she's part of my series, was 18. And at the age of 16, they put the brass coils on her. At the age of 16, she was married off to a young man in her village and immediately sent to Chiang Mai to have the brass coils put on and to earn money for her new in-laws. Oh. So again, it's this thing about how can you make money, especially when you're from a poor rural area. Right. And that, how far would you go? What would you do? So this girl had only put them on for 2 years. So it's being perpetuated by tourism. Sure. Oh, that's interesting. Yes. Yeah. So although I thought it was dying out, it was not. But then I came across in one market a young girl of, say, 6 or 7 with brass coil on. The second time I went back, I tried to find her. And I found her without the brass coils. And so, in fact, she had a clip-on brass coil. Oh, okay. And the day I went to her village, the second time, she was getting ready for a special event in her village to celebrate the culture. And so she was dressing up in kind of more traditional clothes and putting the brass coils on. And she was quite proud and happy to be doing this, that it was, showing where she came from. Right. You're coming in as an outsider. There's usually an interpreter, I'm assuming. What would you say is the most counterintuitive observation you've had? Other than connecting the idea that, this is how they are making themselves more desirable. So desire is a big aspect. But is there more to it? Like, is it more than just a courtship ritual? No, it's just a way of life. They just did it. That's what's really come out. It's like they don't see that it's anything like, no, that's, if you are stuck in a small village and that's what everyone does, that's what you do. Mm-hmm. They don't see it as any remarkable or interesting. So what about then the curiosity of Wall Street Journal and Australia and all these people about saying, bound feet, or either the coils or anything like? What do it's difficult. I've been fighting myself recently because there is kind of the issue of the great white helper coming in and do it my way. It's Saviour. It's the great white Saviour coming in saying, that's wrong, you should do it another way, right. And that, I'll show you. I'm not trying to say that what they're doing is wrong. I think that we've always been fascinating by other things. I've always been fascinated by other worlds, other things, new things. I find it inspiring and stimulating. And I'm currently now just started a course in gender studies because I'm fascinated about carrying on this, about why do we do this? Why do we alter ourselves in any society? So I'm not trying to say, look at them, how the horrible things that they do, because I actually think it was quite beautiful.
Mm-hmm. When did you start doing photography more seriously or whatever? And you said, well, 9 years ago. I was like, 9 years ago? That's nothing. That's like, this recent.
Well, I was in Hong Kong. This is the third time I've lived in Hong Kong, and this is the longest. This time I arrived 14 years ago, and I said, I'm not leaving. If I lose my job, or if my job finishes, then I'm hell or high water, I'm going to stay and get my PR, which is obviously what I did. And in 1998, when I was here for the second time, I went to Beijing and I couldn't stop photographing. I went on a wing-on tour, and the funny is that the reason why I laugh is because it was majority, 98% of them were local Chinese, Hongers, Cantonese speakers, and me. Mm-hmm. But they were the cheapest because they didn't have, the tour wasn't done in any English. Mm-hmm. So they were always very confused by me, but I was very happy because I got really cheap hotel and flights. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to Beijing on one of these 6-day trips to Beijing over the Easter, I think it was, of 1998. And as I went by myself, there was a single supplement, and unless I shared the room with the tour guide. Right. So I did that. So, and I would get up like at 5 a.m. and go to the parks, Renmin Park, and photograph the people doing Tai Chi, ballroom dancing, walking their birds. Mm-hmm, Actually, I saw some people the other day walking their birds. They still do it in Hong Kong, in the bird cages. Sure. And I was just like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I went round a lot of old areas, the hutongs, and I had this man following me. And eventually he came up to me and he said, I'm so glad that you're photographing these buildings because the symbol painted on the wall means that they are derelict and ready for demolition. Oh, wow. And that was the start of when they started pulling down a lot of the old hutong areas around the Forbidden City to build high-rises. Mm-hmm. So I would get up early and I couldn't stop photographing. And I just thought, this is weird. Mm-hmm. What is it? I'm getting so excited about it. And then in the October of 1998, I went to Tibet. And I came back and I showed people my photographs of Tibet and Beijing. I went there for 3 weeks. And people said, these are great. You should do more of these. You should sell them. And I was like, whoa, I so enjoyed this that I suddenly realized I'd found my passion. So it was really in 1998 that I discovered it.
That's great. That's great. So the one, I want to point people to your work. You included a website, Her Story, was it?
Living Her Story.
Can you give the URL so people can go check it out?
Yeah. So it's Living Her Story rather than History. Mm-hmm. Photography.com. There's some on joefarrell.com, but it's not well maintained. If anyone out there wants to help me. I've got Instagram and Twitter and my Facebook page.
Joe Farrell, thank you. This has been really good.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting